My name is Amanda.
And I'm Kristin.
And we are the Exorcisters. So sit back, relax, and let's get creepy. Welcome to our 5th Haunted Happy Hour. And this is actually our, first episode with a formal interviewed guest.
Yes, not just a sit-in guest.
Yes, so you have, of course, myself and Kristin, but we would also like to welcome Miss Jessie Morris. Welcome.
Yes, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me on.
And again, this is a very relaxed format. We are drinking, actually, simply orange mango mimosas because Jessie is co-author of a book that she wrote with her mother, DJ, called Heaven, Hell, and a Mango. Mm-hmm. And this happy hour is all about near-death experiences, and that's a pretty broad term. But basically, if somebody has been in a coma, has coded, has officially died and come back, and what they experienced. And Jessie and her mother wrote an entire book because you were actually in a coma.
I was, and I did the whole flat line, see the light, came back to life, zombie-like living.
Yeah, and this book is actually on Amazon. Mm-hmm. So again, Heaven, Hell, and a Mango by Jessie Morris and DJ Morris. And it was really cool because your mother, of course, was your basically caretaker with all these doctors and therapists and things coming in and out and trying to figure out what was wrong with you. She was your advocate. So you get her point of view, and then you also get Jessie's point of view of being in the coma and dying and coming back and everything that you experience. So it's a really cool back and forth story. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but of course we can't even touch on everything that you experienced that you wrote down. So if you're interested, again, Heaven, Hell, and a Mango by Jessie and DJ Morris on Amazon, hit it up. So we asked some of our listeners some questions, but what really stuck with me in your book was there was one dream you had talking about basically dream or experience, or I can't ever understand what you felt like it, you were feeling, but there were a bunch of tiny little versions of you that came out of your body and thought they weren't going to be able to go back into basically what was this vessel you didn't want to leave behind. And that, I had to stop reading and think about it for a little bit because I was like, that is, first of all, terrifying. Because if they don't get back in, that's you leaving, dying, right?
Absolutely.
So my biggest question, I think, reading this, it sounds so terrifying. Did you feel like fear as we know it here during all of this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The fear was constant. Literally, I think that it was my own, in a way, it was my own horror movie because it was so chaotic. There was no concept of time, so I didn't know, where I was going and what was going to happen next. And things out of the realm of what could happen in the real world were just consistently happening to me. So being left alone in a dark room to die, my body breaking down, parts of me dismantling, watching people just die around me, being left in all of these terrifying moments, it was probably the most consistent emotion I had was fear.
So in your book, you have a lot of your stories that you experienced when you were in the coma. When you came out, did you remember all of them vividly, or did it come back to you over time?
Came back over time. So it's kind of funny how comas, you're not supposed to remember anything immediately. And they told me that, and at first I couldn't say anything because I had a tracheotomy, so there's a big old hole in my throat, a big tube going down. So they kept telling me, usually you're not going to remember anything from your coma, so don't expect to. But I immediately start trying to write things out. Mm-hmm. I had atrophy, so it was hard for me to put anything down on paper. Right. Mm-hmm. And then I got to texting, which is really funny. Like, I used to be able to text in my sleep. So next thing I know, I'm texting out these things that had happened to me, and people around me are like, wait, no, but that kind of makes sense to something that was happening out here. And I just go into this whole deal of writing down everything I could remember in that moment. And over time, certain sounds, smells, and even the way the lighting would hit me would bring back a memory.
Would trigger you, basically.
Exactly.
Interesting. So real quick, just a very brief overview. What happened to you? How long were you in the coma, to just give the listeners like some background?
Yeah.
So I am still officially labeled as a mystery diagnosis.
Okay.
That's comforting.
I was watching Mystery Diagnosis when they told me that too. It was hilarious. I'm like, hey. But I had a septic gallbladder, and when I went into the hospital, they thought it was a virus. They knew my gallbladder was bad, but they thought I had a virus on top of that. So I went in, and immediately they assigned 16 different doctors to my case, and every one of those doctors asked for a blood test.
Right.
9 vials for 16 doctors in a period of 24 hours.
That's a lot of blood.
They bled me to death. And the sepsis overtook my body. And I fought it for a few days, but I lost my coherency pretty early on into the situation. And so...
Is that because of how much blood they took?
Yes, absolutely. And I was on morphine, which if you've ever been on morphine...
I can't even handle hydros.
Oh, it's
so
amazing. I remember raving about the morphine. Yeah, those combinations didn't work too well, so I guess I was one of the lucky ones. My doctor, who was caring for me, had seen that in a patient just a few weeks before, and they had died from it.
Wow.
And so he didn't get them to ICU quick enough. For me, he noticed the symptoms, and he had me shipped to ICU pretty fast. From that point in time, they then put me on a respirator, which they have to medically induce you into a coma to put you on one. So they induced me into the coma, and then from there I was out for 16 days. They fought back and forth to say I wasn't in enough of a condition to have my gallbladder out, and then as I coded several times and I went into complete lung failure, which they call ARDS, so I had acute respiratory distress syndrome. So once that occurred, they said I was too fragile for them to remove the now septic gallbladder. So they just let me sit for about 16 days, and then on the final day, my mom had kind of pulled a trick on the surgeon by saying, you know, once she has these life-altering blood pressure medication on board, you're just do the surgery because she's not going to survive it anyway. So my blood pressure bottomed out. They brought in the medication. While they were doing research on it or finding her the paperwork, whatnot, my sister and brothers were able to get my blood pressure back up. So they didn't actually put the meds on board, but they hung them. So she conned the doctor into, well, there's the meds, schedule the surgery.
Yeah.
They took my gallbladder out, and I think it was another day before I was awake.
Oh my god. So if they had just done that in the beginning, we'd be fine.
We would have been fine.
We wouldn't even have this book right now.
We wouldn't have a very great story to tell, obviously. But I would have been the in and out patient and on with my life. But instead, they like to try to think it was something pretty intense that was going on in there, and it was just a simple case of sepsis. So yeah.
Is it difficult for you to talk about?
Yes.
Okay.
Over time.
Thank you for talking about it with us, though.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Your mother was there the whole time, of course. My mother would be too. She doesn't live here, but her ass would have been on a plane in 2 seconds flat. So you described in your book your relationship with your mother, and I can't imagine on her side, even just reading her side, going through it as a mother, having to protect your child up against some odds that you don't even understand. Are you still as close with your mom as you were?
I think that over the years, yeah.
Good.
Yes.
Good. I can't imagine it would drive you apart at all.
No. In fact, it was funny. We were fighting a little bit the other week, and she goes, "You couldn't survive without me." And I said, "Yes, okay, well, technically, I wouldn't be alive without you, but..." It's like, all right, you win that one.
Now she gets to hold that over your head for the rest of your
I
life.
loved it. It was so hilarious. I was like, all right. Yeah, she can.
Does she know you're recording today?
She does. She wants a copy of this. In
Oh,
fact,
yeah,
so she's
yeah.
pretty excited.
I just had a comment. I found it fascinating when you were talking about how things changed in your dreams that were happening in real life.
Yeah.
Like how you were making that honking sound, and in your brain you changed it to a clown. That was the most fascinating thing to me.
Oh my God.
I love that.
I love that so much. That sound was the funniest and worst sound ever. And to this day, if I hear that honking sound, it drives me right back there.
You think of that clown?
It's so, yeah.
That's so cool.
I think of that clown, and I immediately associate it to my brother Rob.
Okay.
Which is the funniest thing, because for some reason, for a person who is mortified by clowns, he was the one in my mind with that honking sound, and it just it made him a clown. It made sense, and it just drives this whole idea of he's the clown in my life, the honking sound, and
so your brain crossed that.
It just crosses these weird wires, and I love it so much.
So, since you brought it up, I've got to ask. So you had twin brothers named Bob and Robert?
They're not twins.
Oh,
this
they're
is
not.
a very funny story.
Okay.
So my brother Bob, who is a Robert, met another Robert early in high school.
Okay.
And I guess these two were so much alike. In fact, not I guess. These two are so much alike. It's like Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
Okay.
Got it.
Oh, okay.
It is exactly like that. Just two idiots who couldn't live in this world without one another. And so they happened to both be Roberts. And I kid you not, they hung out with another Robert.
Are you serious?
In high school.
The Roberts.
So it was the Roberts. It was Bob, Rob, and Bobby.
Okay, that helps me out so much because I'm like, seriously,
Like how?
I'm putting in my brain, how did that happen?
Robert is a family name. No, I'm sure.
Exactly right.
Every member of the family.
So many Roberts. No, I get asked that question all the time.
Perfect.
I'm like, my brother Bob and my brother Rob, and they're like, wait.
Yeah, exactly.
Stop right there.
Bob drug Robert home one day and said he needs some advice about something, and Robert just never left, and to this day.
Oh, okay.
I mean, he officiated my wedding. He's been my brother forever through thick and thin.
Got it.
Better or worse, he's still part of the family.
That makes sense. Okay, I love that story, but yeah, I was like, okay.
I promise, this is a real life scenario.
And speaking of your wedding, there is a man you talk about that was like by your side the whole time, and that's who you had a child with as well.
Yep.
And you're still together?
Technically, we are, yeah. We have had our ups and downs, and these last 2 years have been us more apart, just trying to build our lives more separately right now.
Yeah.
But, yes, he was the guy who was there. We were friends at the time, and I remember him showing up to the hospital the day I got admitted because we were supposed to hang out. I texted him like, oh yeah, I can't hang out. I gotta go to the hospital and stuff.
I'm busy.
in the hospital. Pretty sick. And he showed up, and I mean, no one could keep him away. So he just stayed there with me through everything.
That's cool.
He even sucked the snot out of my trach hole, which was super, like there was this little vacuum thing. And when it would get too thick, he'd just pull out the vacuum. It's like, there you go. Yeah.
True love.
True love. He stuck around for that. So, but you know, every relationship has their ups and downs.
Oh,
of
definitely.
course. Yeah. So. But he's still there today, and we have the coolest kid in the world.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Axel, right?
Axel Lee. Yeah, he's my little monster. He's so funny. He's into the moon landing right now.
50th anniversary.
Just turned its 50th anniversary yesterday.
That's what got him. Is
That's
my mom
awesome.
was talking about, and he's like, "What is this? There are people who walked on the moon," and now he's very into it. That and sharks and Shark Week, and I love him for that.
Yeah,
my little nugget.
That's so cool to hear you talk about having a child after going through something that you went through that you almost didn't make it out of.
Yeah.
To see the other side.
And in the book, didn't you say that they weren't sure you were going to be able to have kids? That's really cool too.
They were pretty spot on about that being a thing because every day I had to have x-rays and my body went through so much trauma and there was so much rebuilding to be done. They were certain, like, you know, you're probably never going to have children. They thought I would have paralysis in my right leg. They thought I would never be able to live on my own or graduate college. And I not only went back to school less than 6 weeks later, which was ill-advised, but I did it anyway. I got my bachelor's degree. I got my master's degree. I had my son all in the same couple of years. So take that, doctors.
Yeah. Is there anything you still struggle with?
Yes. Simple math.
Okay. I still struggle with that.
I never was in a coma and can't do algebra, so.
Oh, it was so funny. I came out of the coma, and my sister's boyfriend at the time had some calculus homework to be done, so I helped him with that. And then
did it end well?
It actually, I was okay with calculus.
Good.
But when they were trying to get me to do simple addition problems and stuff to see how far advanced I still was, I was struggling, and I can't say extensive. Like if you have say 6,352, but you write it out and I look at it, I don't know how to say it. Like, there's a 6, there's some other numbers, like, I'm going to get this. That, and I'm actually finding consistencies with some other people I've met who have brain damage as well, that there's this whole deal where I could be talking to a person. It doesn't happen to me anymore, but for the first 2 years I would be talking to somebody and sometimes it sounds like they're saying a foreign language. They're speaking in a foreign language.
That's scary.
And they're speaking in English and I have no idea what they're saying.
That's terrifying.
Yeah,
Well,
it was.
I think that's scary as shit.
My
It
mother,
was so interesting.
my mother was actually in a motor vehicle accident and she had a traumatic brain injury, and hers was the opposite. She thought she was speaking like a different language. So it got to the point where even, I mean, this was 15, 20 years ago, and she still asked people, do you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm saying? All the time, because she's not sure.
She's like, I am speaking English, right?
Exactly.
That's awesome. It's weird what your brain goes through in those moments.
What, if you don't mind me asking, since we are like a horror podcast,
Which I love.
good, yay.
Yay!
What is the scariest alternative reality experience, or do you feel like they were dreams at all, or do you feel like you had actually crossed a plane and everything was actually happening to you and it wasn't just your brain making shit up? Like, how do you feel about that?
I felt like I actually crossed a plane. I went on another side. It was completely out of body.
Because your mother explained it as purgatory. I think it was your mother. Purgatory, right?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I explained it as that too.
Right.
Because I felt like I was in hell. It was hard to, or I guess just purgatory in that sense. It was hard to, well, one, I felt pain.
Okay.
Something that you shouldn't feel in dreams, right? They always say you can distinguish a dream because you can't feel pain. Well, I have this awesome scar on my arm, which is now very minimal, which I hate that it's so tiny. Because outside of my coma, or when I outside in the real world, I got a potassium burn from an IV. Okay. So my skin, everything melted. It's actually kind of cool how that happens. So I had this big old bubble. But inside my coma,
Was this the story of the old lady?
The old lady. Yeah, the old lady. So this is how it happened to me. But as I'm sitting there and she hits me with it, right, it hurt like hell. It was so fucking painful. And that's when it was kind of like, okay, this is not a dream.
Yeah.
You know, where in dreams you don't feel the pain. I felt every minute of it. Yeah. And it was disgusting and horrifying throughout the entire thing. So I felt like I crossed onto another plane. I truly feel like I was in some variation. I'm not religious, but I felt like I was in some variation of hell. Because everything that was happening to me was senseless and painful. So it was, and I mean, I hope that like whatever heaven or the positive side of the other side would not be as painful and dark
and horrible.
Yes.
So my question, and again, if it's too much, you don't have to answer it. What was the scariest thing you experienced on the other side? Because I know there was seeing people you love die over and over, which I think I've heard hell explained as very personalized, because I've read a lot about this subject even before we decided to do this, that hell is whatever your hell is. So you saw a lot of deaths happen over and over, but you also basically went toe to toe with the devil.
Yes.
So what was the scariest thing you experienced that you wanted to get out of so badly, but of course your brain and your body and your soul was like, nope,
trapped, super trapped. I think part of it, there's little instances of it. The first time I heard I was going to die, that was really terrifying for me because I was in a hospital bed and and I can't speak for myself. They're like, she's gonna die, it's done, it's over. And that was just like, no, I have no control over this, I'm not supposed to, don't let me die. But it was imminent. And then the second one was the dark theater.
Yeah.
That was mortifying just because of the thing that was in there with me. I'm alone in this theater, but I'm not alone.
Yeah. So it was a movie theater.
It was a movie theater. And it was almost like what you would consider like an older one where it had like the red curtains and you can see the white screen. And it was something kind of out of what you would say a classic horror movie in so many ways. And I'm just sitting there and it wasn't being in this dark. It was the thing that I could feel in the room with me. And then that thing latched on, and it followed me through the rest of it.
Ooh.
So the next scariest moment that sticks with me the most is when I went toe-to-toe with the devil, because I was so frustrated. And the fact that it was my mom for so long, and then suddenly it just morphed into this dark black thing, and I couldn't stop just ripping at it and trying to fight my way out of it. That was mortifying to me, because I didn't know if I was going to win, but at least I had a fighting chance at that point in time. And then the weirdest thing is when I came back, I think I spent 3 additional weeks in the hospital, if I recall, and I was home by October 31st.
Nice.
You know, right? It was perfect timing. And it was I think I was home for the first time by myself. And I'm walking through my house, and there's this old security box on the wall. And this thing isn't attached to anything anymore. You can see the wires just kind of dangling out of the back of it. I feel something. I feel that thing come back.
Okay.
Oh, and it's kind of been with me throughout this whole process. So I whenever somebody suggests, like, well, maybe I'll stay with you, I would say, yes, absolutely.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Just hang out with me. It's fine. And at this point in time, there was nobody to really babysit me. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'll be home by myself and everything's fine. And then that crawling feeling gets in my spine, and I feel like I'm not alone in the house. And I hear something at the front door. And so I walk towards the front door, and I'm standing next to this disconnected security alarm. And I hear something thud against the front door. And then that alarm,
I got hairs going right now.
just blaring. It just goes off. I kid you not. I curled up into a little fetal ball. Something passed by the window, and I just curled up in a fetal ball.
Dude, I bet.
Like,
holy crap.
I am not
I think I would have just passed out.
Right?
Probably almost did. That was the scariest thing in the world for me. And this is a person, like, I spent my all through high school. Not all through high school. I loved horror movies when I grew up, so I was very paranoid. By the time
you've seen this movie before,
because I've seen it. Exactly. You know, when I had rules when I went into the public restroom, like, okay, you know what stall is the safe stall to go.
I love that.
Right.
You know how to handle these situations, and in this situation, I'm like, this is a horror movie situation, and this is not going to end well because I'm not as strong as I usually am, and I don't know how to fight this thing on this plane. So it was freaking, I was like, just fetal position, just pretend like it's not there. You know, the kid who crawls under the covers, like, it's not real, it's not real, it's not real.
I mean, what else do you do, though? Like, you know that you've experienced this already, and this thing, which we can assume is some sort of demonic force, like, because I think when you enter into some sort of realm like that, these things want to feed off you, as they did with you, and try to break you, and so then you've been touched by that, and so what if something latches onto you and continues to stay with you, like, which, you know, it may. One of the questions that was curious to me, but I also got on our Instagram, was, has this changed how you think about death? Do you fear death, or did it make it better for you, basically?
That is the best question I could ever get. It absolutely changed everything I thought about death. We always fear death, right? We don't want to...
Right. The fear of the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen, and it's final and forever.
Forever. I gained a sense of control over death, that I welcome it when it comes, and I know that at this point in my life, there's no need to fear it, but I just know I don't want to. You know, I'm just not ready for it, but I'm not afraid of it anymore.
That's awesome.
And that's I think, good, that's an awesome thing to feel when people talk about death and they get sad and they get scared. It's like, no, it's not as bad as people think it is.
Yeah.
Because in death, you really do leave behind everything you knew in the world. Right. So I can recall being in the light, and that sense of feeling like all I want to do is get to the other side. And I can smell the mangoes, and I can feel the fresh breeze, and I know it's going to be beautiful and amazing. and I didn't think of anything else. I didn't remember anything from my world. So for us, it's kind of sad to know, like, oh yeah, you don't remember your dogs, you don't remember your family, you don't remember anything. But to be that person who dies, it's not the loss for them. It's okay for them.
Right.
For us, it's hard living in this world, but to be the one who goes through it, it's actually quite pleasant.
Well, then on top of that, let's go even darker.
Okay.
There's a point in your book that you and your mother both address that how you're not sure how you want to be buried or cremated.
Yes.
Have you decided? I'm so curious.
I'm such a pain in the butt. Well, I can say ass. Wait, I'm a pain in the ass.
You can.
No, okay, this is the shitty thing. After the coma, I was like, okay, I got it. I want to be entered into that Body Works exhibit.
Oh, cool.
I'm an incomplete specimen because they took my fucking gallbladder.
That's a good fucking point.
They just won't take variations. This one's missing this, but still functions. This one's missing this.
Still functions. Like, come on, man. It was so sad to find out I couldn't do it. So I still haven't 100% decided.
Figured out.
But I'm kind of edging towards the bury me with a tree seed. And like, you know, like those
that's
weird where, they bury you under a tree and you become a tree. I'm like, that's cool.
Yeah, right?
That'd be pretty epic. So that's kind of my
That's where you're leaning right now?
That's where I'm leaning. My mom was going to have me cremated.
Yeah, that was what she decided?
Yeah, she told me that. Because it wasn't, I feel like it was like a few weeks before, maybe not even, that I had found out that with cremation, and if this is too much for the users on here, I'm sorry.
They don't care. We talked about genocide in one episode.
We
got drunk and talked about genocide.
We ended up
like
crying.
the concept of genocide is very intriguing. Not that I love it as an act, but the concept of genocide is an incredible, it's like a horrible, incredible thing. That
we earn our E rating
good
on the platform.
Yeah, sure do.
Yeah, no, you're good to talk
I
about
haven't
whatever
gone
you
through
want.
your whole library yet, but I gotta get it. I found out that cremation, they grind your bones up in a blender because you can't burn somebody's bones. To ashes, right? So you gotta grind them up. And I was like, I don't really, like, I'm okay with the fire part of it, but I didn't realize I had to be put in a blender.
And that was it.
And I was kind of like, I don't want that. And then on the other side of it, I would be bored spending eternity in a freaking box. So I'm like, I don't want to do that.
I don't want to do any of that.
Like, don't put me in a box and don't grind me in a blender. But my mom's like, I had to think of something, so I was just gonna grind you in a blender. I'm sorry. Like, I get it.
So my dad passed away when I was 18, and he actually always wanted to be cremated. Well, they had talked about it, and he was like, I prefer cremation for like me, but whatever you guys need. But my mother just wanted so desperately to have a place to go where he physically was. And that's so cool. We ended up burying him. So I think a lot, like your mom had to make a decision what was going to be better for her to grieve you.
Exactly.
Might be, like, I think a lot of what is left is for the living, like you said.
Exactly.
Who passes, they pass on to something we don't know or understand. And the only people that can't even grasp it are people that have died and come back, like you. And I don't envy you in one way, but in another way, you got a very liberating resolve there that we'll never get unless we die. And, and I don't know, like one of the other things I got was these two are variations of the same question. So when you were entering the about to die phase, or, when you coded and came back, what was the last thing that you remember seeing or thinking before you actually flatlined, if unless your brain was too, or you were experiencing something to where it didn't matter if you coded or not because you were already there.
I can't actually remember like right before I coded or associate it. I think before I saw the light, the last thing I think that happened was the fight with the devil. Okay, that was the hardest part. Was just fighting off that figure and then getting to a good place. Other than that, things that I can remember.
But you saw a light. Like the light that everyone remembers. It happened.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Did you feel like you had a choice to go or not?
Yeah. I think that was the thing. I chose to come back. And that was kind of the cool thing, is because I was in that light forever. And again, no concept of time.
Right.
And anything could happen at any point, you know. Sometimes that was very frustrating.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I want to know where I am in this. And it was just never ending. And there were no walls and no dimensions. When I was in the light, it was, okay, I want to get to that point. I'm going to that point. And then at one point, I said, no, I'm going to turn around. And I turned around. And so I decided not to go all the way through. And I think some people are pulled out of that.
Yeah.
And then I think some of us have a choice. And that's where it becomes more easy for me to say, like, okay, I can do this again if I have to, because, you know, I had a choice.
Yeah.
And I had so many choices. And I think that's kind of a cool thing about going to the other side, is we think things happen to us. And I know that I make choices because I had choices to... I know it's weird. You guys remember the part about the Coca-Cola?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The weirdest things.
Where you could grab it or not.
Yeah. And it's like, if I drank the Coca-Cola, got that, I was going to hell. Mm-hmm. So I chose not to touch the Coca-Cola. Like, nope. Yeah. It's not happening. I'm not going to give in to my...
The devil was tempting you.
Exactly. My temptation, those temptations. I'm not going to give into it, because I know that if I do that, I go to hell. Mm-hmm. And that's just not happening. I want to go to heaven. And so I fought to get to that point. And really, when I got to that point, I said, no, I want to go home. Mm-hmm. So I went home. Yeah. I think that was kind of the coolest thing. It's like, and it's fun for me when I run into somebody else who's like, yeah, I've seen the light. Mm-hmm. And then we can share in those stories. In fact, my mom, when she had me, she almost died. She had a lot of blood loss. Mm-hmm. So she went into the light too. So that's another way we connect, is the fact that we both have seen the light.
Yeah. Not cool that she almost died.
No.
Cool that she
made a choice too, though. The really cool thing is, in that moment, she heard a baby cry. And I don't know if it was me or another baby, because they had rushed me out of the room. Mm-hmm. She was alone in the room. It was the 80s. It was in Germany. She was alone in the room right after she had me. They were more focused on me. And so she was, when she went into the light, she heard a baby and went, no, I got things I got to do. I got to get back out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So she made a choice to come back.
It's interesting talking about the light, because we tend to, like she said, get pretty dark and personal, because that's what this whole premise of this whole podcast is. And my dad, I already said he died. He had cancer. Most people that have listened know that. But he was sick with cancer for about 7 months, and he was stage 4 when we found out, and it went fast. The last 2 or 3 months of his life, probably I'd say 2 months, and especially the last month, he was in ICU. He was on hospice care, which is pretty much morphine. Yeah. Until you die. They were like, my mom told me that he was holding on for the last few weeks, and he wouldn't go. Like, he wasn't there, but he wouldn't go. And one night she just sat by him and was like, it's okay. You can leave. You should leave. There's nothing for you here. Just go. And he died that night. Mm-hmm. Like, it took him a couple hours, but I think that once he heard my mom say, it's okay, you can go, because especially even if you're on morphine, but he was probably comatose at that point as well. Like, his body had started shutting down. So I just wonder, and if seeing people eventually when we get to the other side is something we can do. Like, if I can talk to him again and ask him, like, what did you experience? Were you holding on? Were you trying to come back, but your body was too weak? Like, you had some strength left, and sometimes in cancer patients, like, there's none. They can't. If he was waiting for her to say, like, you can go, and how his brain processed that. Maybe it was like a physical letting go. Maybe she let go and he went, or that's just something that it's not necessarily, I wouldn't say makes that loss any better, because again, he's free from pain, but we're not on this side. But that doing this, like, we have things to talk about after this as well, kind of made me feel better about death. I agree. Like, nothing's happened to me like that, but it made me feel better. Even some of the more negative experience, nothing that you went through necessarily when you were there was positive, other than you got to make decisions. But on the other side of it, it seemed to have a positive impact. And that's something that I've taken from your book, some of the stories that we have read about it, because people say it's pretty non-traumatic. Getting there is traumatic.
Yeah, exactly.
Dying, not the death. which is something you've always said too.
Yes. Because I wasn't in a coma, but I've gone through a near-death experience as well.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so...
I say that, and I mean, it's cool because
you're finding...
You get to, you get to experience something.
I don't want to interrupt.
No, go. I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, so what happened to me was I was probably 10, and I went to a pool with my friend, and we were doing the stupid game that kids do where you dunk them underwater and let's see how long you can hold your breath, and I didn't. I took on a lot of water, and nobody saved me, actually. I saved myself. So she ended up telling me later that you did the best dead man's float I've ever seen in my life. Yeah, because I was dead. That's why. Because I remember specifically...
lifeguard. First of all, was there a lifeguard at this public?
No, I completely agree. I literally don't remember there being a lifeguard there. There had to have been, right? It's a public pool.
A public pool, yeah.
But I don't remember there being one. I don't remember anybody saving me. I remember just coming back and her telling me that afterwards.
Wow.
But I remember I took on a lot of water and I passed out and I just like floated above my body and I saw myself laying there, just floating there, like on a TV. Like I saw everything that was going on. And that was it. And then I just came back and I walked home and I was so traumatized. Like going there was totally fine. It was honestly peaceful. I would choose drowning over anything. But getting back, it hurt so bad. And then I had to go home and tell my mother what happened, and that was fucking great.
Your mom lost it.
Yeah. She didn't believe me. She was like, yeah, you took on a lot of water, you passed out. But I was not there. I was above watching myself drown.
And do you also feel like you made the decision to go back?
Yes.
Do you think you could have kept ascending,
yes,
essentially?
Absolutely. And it was so peaceful, and I kind of wanted to, honestly. And that definitely sits with me now. Like, I am petrified of death, but it's not death. I'm petrified of the pain that you have to go through to get there, and possibly going through that pain alone. But the death part, I'm not saying I'm ready, but I'm ready. Like, okay, that's fine. It's okay.
When it comes, it comes. It's like, I don't think there's a process of being ready for it, but then there is. So I agree. Even in terms of being a cancer patient, there comes a time when you say, okay, I'm going to stop fighting this and just accept it.
Yeah.
So
right, exactly. Which I think my mom basically permitting my dad to die was him saying, like, you know, because there was no fight left. Like, we all knew that, but in his mind, I don't know what was happening in his mind. I don't know where he was, and I'll never know until I die.
Yeah.
You know, and so maybe there was still fight in him, and his, I mean, it's kind of like, let's say, like one of my grandmothers died from lung cancer. My other grandmother died from Alzheimer's and dementia. I saw one lose their mind, and I saw one lose their body. Much rather lose my body, because, you know, there could have still been fight left in my dad's mind, but his body was gone. But at least he was able to do things at the end, you know. And so I wonder, like, with dementia patients and Alzheimer's patients, when they die, did they lose their mind? If they are, like, it's just like, what do they have left internally? You know. So it blows my mind like to think about all that, and like the fact that you were there. Like, I think I read your book in 2 days, and the first day I actually had it on my phone and I was reading it, and I read it for so long, just laying down, that when I stopped scrolling on my phone, I had just been staring at it so long, the words started moving around, and I was like, I gotta take a fucking break. Because both sides fascinated me. What your mother was going through, and how your brain was basically describing it to you, like the machines, like the burn, like hearing that back and forth. I'm so glad that you did it together, so that we knew what was happening in the room versus what was happening. How was your brain trying to tell you what was happening, because you were desperately asking for answers. Has your mom changed her views about death from your experience as well? And her experience, because she went through it too. Yeah. You know, is that something you got to bond on, or was it something you didn't really want to talk about because neither one of you want each other to die or to think about dying?
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part. We're like, don't die. We tell that to each other all the time, like, don't die. I think, and I never really get a chance to talk to her about her perspective of death after that event. I just know that she's a little more fragile with me,
of course,
as is everybody. When I had my son, I had a C-section, and I guess it freaked everyone out in the room.
Yeah.
It went
Yeah,
from like, oh, this is great, this is laughter, and
Baby.
baby coming. And in fact, we were laughing so hard that my family outside of the room was texting to say, are you guys having a baby in there or having a comedy show? Like, what the hell is happening in there? And so when it came down to the C-section and they said, you're gonna have a C-section, I was calm. I was ready to take on what was gonna happen. My doctor knew my health history, of course, as she should, and she had the specialist there in case something went wrong. And my spouse and my mom got very quiet, and my best friend came in to sit with me for a minute, and I was fine, but everybody around me was quietly freaking out
Because they had essentially lost you before.
they had.
Yeah.
So it became a very intense moment of like, oh God, don't let this happen again. And for me, I knew what to expect if something happened again. But it was, so I think overall that kind of leads her to this this realization that it's more obvious that, or it's more possible to believe like you have to maybe one day live without your kids. But
hopefully not. Jesus Christ, yeah.
Right.
Because
right.
you should
like,
go
you
before
should
your
never
children. Yeah.
have to experience that. And then there was this cool bond where when we were writing this book, we had taken it and we actually wrote it apart. We wrote our situations apart, and then we started connecting the dots, and we were just like, holy
That's really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That we can tie all of this together. And it was,
And that it made sense. It was very seamless. Like what was happening with you is happening with her, what's happening with you is happening with her.
That's awesome. I love hearing that you felt that, because for us, it all makes sense. And as we were putting it together, we're like, we wonder if it'll make sense to other people. And we like that we took it from that perspective too, because she did fight so hard from the outside. And there is a component to where we're writing this for the living. And I want people to have a sense of comfort in knowing, one, your loved one can hear you when they're in a coma.
And that was when you felt like you were actually in a room with her sitting next to you.
Absolutely.
That's
I can sense her there. She was the scar on my arm. I know this is kind of weird backstory on my mom. Her spirit animal is a bear. She loves them. She is like a mama bear in every way you can think of. She put a 6'5" doctor through a wall because he left. He was going to sign my death certificate. He said, no, I'm done with this case. And we actually found it in the records where the nurses were trying to contact him. It was because two respiratory therapists
Which were the good guys, basically.
They were the good guys.
Yeah.
They got up the nerve. They went to the pediatric ward. They stole the medicine they had to use to keep me alive, and they kept me alive. So it was nurses and
RTs, basically.
RTs who did it, and the doctor who went, no, I'm done with this one. And so she attacked him. And there isn't a person who was there who said, oh yeah, no, your mom doesn't have anything. Like, she's not a tough woman at all. Everybody's like, don't piss DJ off. Ever.
Especially, I mean, this isn't, I've seen my mom get irate when something small happened to my brother and I. This is literally your child's life. Like, if you don't spring into action, nobody's going to. And for you to have such a strong, because I'm sure there are some mothers that, and everyone deals with things differently, but luckily your mother is such a strong, headstrong person, where some would just crumple next to their child's body and sob, and that would be it.
Right.
Which would be horrible, but your mom was like, nope, ain't happening.
That was her exact response. No, not today. In fact, I think she wrote about the nurse coming in and telling her she's gonna die. And that was when my mom was like, fuck you, she's not gonna die. And she got out of bed, and she's that type of person. You could tell her, there's nothing you can do. And she's like, fuck you, I'll find a way to do it. If one of us came up with cancer, the cure to cancer would be there tomorrow. She can find it. She's that type of person. And
lucky
I think
for you,
yes, I'm very lucky to have my mom. And she really did get me through the situation, because when that burn came on my arm, it was the shape of a bear. And she was the bear on my arm the entire time. And there were moments we were in the room together, and she volunteered to go instead of me. And that was when she was telling me if I went, she was going to go. And it was, very connecting for us. And I think that creates bond that can never be broken.
And that nobody can, I mean, like, my mother and I are very close, but we're not you brought me back to life because you were there for me kind of close, you know. I don't think that that's, you know, and not to say that you would ever want this to happen to anybody you know, but you got a lot out of it that people don't get. Like, I'll never know that, and I'm not upset about it, but also in the same breath, it's now you have that with your mom, which nobody can change or break, or, you know, that happened and you have that bond now.
I love that fact. It's you can't break that bond. And the bond I have with life is so much more intense than, you know, if I don't know if either of you guys have ever suffered from depression.
Yep.
I had a little bout of it. One right after my son was born, I had postpartum depression, and then about 2 years ago, when my husband and I broke up, I went through a little bout of situational depression, and everybody always asks you the same question: do you feel like killing yourself? Do you feel like dying? And regardless of how shitty I felt, I said, absolutely not. Like, I fought to be here.
I've been there, done that.
Yeah, like, I've been there, I've done that. I've fought to be here. I'm not going anywhere. Like, I can promise you that.
Can you please just help me fix the sad? Like,
exactly. Like, I just want to stop crying every day. You know, it's one of those deals. It's like anything that happens to me could be the shittiest thing in the world, and I just take a brief moment to say, but you know what? You know how valuable life is because you fought for it. So you're here to live it, whether you fucking like it or not.
Which is also something to be grateful for, because I think so many of us, we just get so entrenched into what's making us depressed or anxious, and we have to fight to live through that, but we've never died and had to literally fight to come back to life.
Right.
So it's something that is, I know it's cliche, but like, you got a new lease on life.
You got it. Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what happened. Yeah. I was so ready to live, and I've tried to do it every day. Like, I kid you not. I have chocolate cake for breakfast some days. I wake up and I go, fuck it, I fought to be here. I have some chocolate cake. Like, I think people hate me for that, but it's like, no, it's fine. I deserve what you want. Right. It's kind of incredible. And it's funny because I tell people, oh, this awesome thing, or when they ask me about it, like, it'll come up, you know, oh, Jess died once, and people are like, oh my god, that's horrible. I said, no, it was great.
You're like, I'm so sorry, and you're like, no,
it was awesome. I was glad I went through it, because, you know, it's like, it's so weird because people will tell you, like, oh my god, that from the outside, that's a horrible experience. It's so traumatic. But at the same time, you're like, yeah, but I know that it's not.
Exactly.
In so many ways. Like, no, it's cool. I have this cool experience I can share with the world. I can make people feel better about life.
And death.
I can make people feel better about death. And, you know, I got this. It's kind of fun when, like, every so often somebody would be like, well, we don't really know what happens on the other side. I'm like, I do.
Some of us do, yes.
Yeah, like, not everybody fits into that category.
So after you came out of the coma, since they didn't really know, of course, they took your gallbladder, and that, of course, made the situation 100% better almost. Not 100, but close.
Pretty good.
Were you scared that it was going to happen again since they didn't know what happened? And has that stayed with you, or did you go through, like, a year or two and then you were like, okay, it's gone. Like, whatever it was, I'm fine.
Paralyzing fear for years. I remember sitting in a class, my first class back, right? And I told you, ill-advised, I went early.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there taking a midterm, and somebody coughed near me. I was told by my doctor, one of the good doctors, I was told if I get even a simple cold, it could cause pneumonia, I can slip back into a coma, and I could die from it pretty quickly. And with ARDS as well, it could literally, you have a 30-day stamp on ARDS. So when you code and they officially announce it, ARDS, October 1st was the official day one. October 30th, I could still just randomly die.
Jesus.
Get out of the coma, feeling good, walking around, release me from the hospital. I could get home, take a breath, and just die.
Yeah.
And that was just terrifying. Like, I felt like, wait, this could be my last day. All right, I gotta take this for what it is. It's incredible. It's gonna be a good day. And that's how I felt every single day. And I sat in that midterm and I heard that cough and I just start bawling. Like, I can't be here right now. And anytime somebody would come near me with a sniffle or a sneeze, I would lose it and I'd run away. And it was just like, It was my kryptonite for
Yeah.
so many years. And I think only after my son was born did I get the balls to just let it happen at that point. And now, mind you, out in public, if somebody coughs, I kind of step away again.
Right.
But it doesn't affect me in the same way anymore, because once you have a kid vomit on your freaking chest, you're like, oh, okay, I'm not going to die now.
They're going to bring home everything, so...
everything. And then they don't get it, and then you still get it. You're like, how? You're not sick? How am I sick right now? Oh, yeah. But even in my pregnancy, the first conversation I had with my doctor was I had ARDS, and it was caused by an abdominal infection. So, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it with all of the precautions in place. Mm-hmm. So I kid you not, she had 2 other doctors, one who had both who had dealt with ARDS. One was an OBGYN who had dealt with ARDS in patients, both on standby during my entire pregnancy and through my delivery to make sure I got the best care necessary.
Good.
So it was very gloves, hands-on, make sure she doesn't die of anything. And then only after that did I start to lighten up.
And your mom said several times, the doctors, she didn't trust them. They were not, I mean, they just saw you as a number. So I'm assuming, and maybe I'm wrong, you did not deliver your son at that hospital.
I did not. Oh my God. I have the best story of that. Okay. So I, of course, sued the hospital after that because they did so many things right, that it just it made sense for me to say, hey, look, you guys killed me. So I kind of feel like I need something back off of that.
Yeah.
As well as they tried to charge me $400,000 in medical bills.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
I wasn't going to ask, but I was so curious how much your medical bills were, because I know that what my dad's were, and he was only in the hospital on hospice for a month, and you were there 40 days, I think.
Yeah.
Between getting there and waking up and going through therapy and things.
Exactly. And they expected me to be there through December, and I was out mid-October, actually. I was out mid-October. That was the best day ever.
I bet.
It was expensive, and I had health insurance, but there's this whole deal. They tried to go around the law. I learned a lot on the law for that. So if anybody has questions
on your rights,
your rights in the insurance field, let me know. But so I followed with a suit. I was told one too many times, well, you should have just died. Your family would have made more money. Yes, but I want to live over making $1. So I'm just going to take my life and go over there.
Yeah, right.
And then I found one lawyer who helped me actually sue for the radial nerve damage that I suffered. Because my left hand, it was hilarious. One day I'm holding my guy's hand, and I look and I go, I can't feel that. Is that weird? My brain didn't make that connection until that moment where I was like, I don't feel what's happening with your hand and my hand. And so I called a nurse and I said, is there a problem here? And she goes, oh no, you have a radial nerve damage from that burn in your arm, and it's just going to get worse. So I would randomly drop things because if I wasn't looking at it, I couldn't feel it. So my hand would just let loose. Yeah. I still have numbness in my hand, so I can't feel like that. And it's only in these 2 fingers now, my thumb and my pointer finger, but there's a little nerve damage there. So I did win a small lawsuit from them, and then I just laughed off the rest of the bill because I learned laws. And they promised me free medical care for the rest of my life.
Like you would go back, though, right?
I literally told their lawyer, kill me once, shame on you. Kill me twice, shame on me. You think I'm coming back to this hospital? You're sorely mistaken. And I laughed my ass out of that room. You've got to be shitting me. Free medical care. Yeah.
That's great.
Oh, it was the funniest thing in the world. I definitely go to the alternative hospitals now.
I don't blame you.
I'm not going there. And I try to advise people against using certain doctors.
I was about to say, you should keep tabs on your doctors too, because they'll just move around.
They do, man. They really do. There's one that I'm kind of obsessed with. I love him. He was my second pulmonologist on my case. Oh, and the guy who sent me to ICU, is hilarious because we called him Dr. Evil because of his name. And he was the best one on the case. The pulmonologist, I saw him, I was one of the only people, one of 3 patients that had been on something called an oscillator ventilator. And what it is, it's a ventilation system that's ran by a piston. So instead of blowing your lungs up like a balloon and letting them deflate, causing more damage, it actually scars your lungs to do that. It keeps a consistency in your lungs, so it keeps a constant mass of air flowing through your lungs, pushing out the carbon dioxide and pushing in the oxygen. Okay. So it prevents that damage. It's still new technology, and they haven't had enough adult patients because they use it on NICU babies whose lungs are preemies who are underdeveloped. So they haven't had enough adult patients. So I'm one of 3 patients, the first 3 patients who used it.
That's cool.
Very lucky it was engineered here at the Air Force Academy, actually.
Oh, nice.
So it's still being tested here. And he was doing a research on it, so he came on, used me in his research paper, and when I visited him about 2-3 years later, he did, I didn't come in and say, I was your ARDS patient. So they did the test, the capacity test on me. He walks in the room, he's like, I don't know why you're here. You only have maybe asthma, but not even that. Like barely a case of asthma. I looked at him and I said, I was your ARDS patient. White as a ghost. No.
That's awesome.
This is the girl. So I love scaring him every so often with the, ooh, I'm your ghost.
The ARDS ghost.
I'm the ARDS ghost. And then Dr. Evil didn't know because they didn't share it around the hospital that I had survived. So the day I left, he was on the elevator with me when I was leaving, and he didn't recognize me because I had changed so drastically in that time frame.
I bet, yeah.
That he gets off the elevator, then he realizes it's me. He runs down 2 flights of stairs to catch me at the elevator again and just loses it. Like, oh my God, she lived. That was the thing I kept getting was, oh my God, she lived. Like, yeah, that's right.
Yes, that's because I said I was going to live.
I got this. That was so great.
That's really cool. So on the subject of near-death experiences, and if you experience any of these, feel free to chime in. We got a couple, and we're going to talk about a few different ones because I think everybody's experience, of course, is different. But at the same time, when I was researching this,
they were real similar,
they're
right?
so similar, which that's cool because then you can be like, that's what it is.
Exactly.
Right. So,
well, to start out, we haven't done this in a while, and I'm sorry, you guys, I failed. But there are some near-death experience horror movies if anybody's interested, and I actually did compile a list of some. And I'm just going to name them off. And we have Happy Death Day, Insidious, A Nightmare on Elm Street, The Serpent and the Rainbow, Soul Survivors, Jacob's Ladder. There's a movie actually I want to watch with you. It sounded great. It's called Afterlife. It's literally about this.
That's cool.
That's epic.
The Lazarus Effect. Figured you'd be interested in that.
There in that collection.
Final Destination, The Dead Zone, Dead Awake, and The Nightmare. Those are just a few. There are so many. You could go anywhere with this. It's so broad.
Well, horror movie people, like, if a producer in Hollywood read your book, there is so much that he could take from your nightmares because I mean, first of all, they should just go read your book if they want to know all of them. So we don't want to talk about every single one of them. But some of those are the movie theater. I thought the little, like, versions of yourself coming out were terrifying. Fighting the devil, having to try to save your brothers and watching them die over and over.
Over and over and over again, yeah.
Like, that's all horror movie material that you experienced. So it's a good premise to create these movies on because it's something we don't understand. So you can just let your creative imagination go wild for, like, these producers and writers. So these are just a few stories that I picked up. Some of them are people that submitted. Some of them are things that I've just picked up. And I actually, in college, my very first psychology class, because it's general psychology when you start, one of the chapters was about near-death experiences and what happens in the brain.
That's cool.
Which is really cool. So neuropsychology is not my forte. I typically stayed into the criminology, forensics, and then just like general cognitive behavioral type things in psychology. Neuro was not my thing, but I maintained actually from that general psych class. That was what I remember the most because that was in like 2011 when I started college. So I'll specifically remember that chapter because it was just like, I just couldn't get enough of it. And it was chapter 3 in my textbook. I specifically remember. So we'll talk about some of that too. But this one says, I got hit by a car once when I was about 13, and I will never forget the experience that came afterward. I was biking and a lady hit me with her car. I had a moment prior to being hit where I knew it was going to happen, but it was far too late for me to actually do anything about it. I braced for impact, got hit, and went straight into the state of complete and utter silence. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. There were no smells, no thoughts, and no feelings. I just existed in this peaceful little black bubble, and it was the most at peace I've ever been in my life. It felt like I had been there for hours, but really it had only been a few seconds before I woke up and everything came back. The loud noises, the pain from being hit, all the cars. It's crazy though, because it was one of the most amazing feelings I've ever experienced, which is what I kept reading over and over again.
Yeah, I wanted to interject. I know that I read a bunch of it, and I think you did too, of people reaching such a high sensitivity of peace that they try and then meditate to get there, and then when they do, they're just sad that they've reached that peace again.
Yeah.
Because you can't die unless you're ready to die. You can't just keep staying in that meditative state. So you're kind of sad having to come back to the world, the painful world.
Yeah. Which is why life is, I think, described as by so many as a test. Like, you're here and it's a test, and then you get the reward at the end. Yeah. Which most of us don't think of death as some sort of reward or resolve after this life. We go about life trying to avoid it at all costs, which we should. Right. Like, we develop relationships and meaning here, but at the same time, we have what seems like a more deeper personal peace at the end of all of this. So this one's really short, so I'll just say this one real quick. A friend of mine described death, because she was technically dead twice, as being surrounded by darkness and floating with some sort of warm gel-like substance covering her, and she never wanted to leave. And again, never wanted to leave. Most peaceful I've ever been.
Over and over
Did
again,
not want to come back.
It just keeps popping up.
Yeah.
Death seems pretty peaceful. Not saying kill yourself. Not saying that.
Never.
You have to be ready for it in so many ways. Like, you live a full, complete life, and then I think there comes a state of like, okay, it's peaceful, it's great, and I'm okay with moving forward with this. Right. But I have to say, there's a reason why everybody comes back, is because, oh, wait, I haven't finished this yet.
Exactly.
You know, and it might not be present to us, but somewhere in there, it's like, no, I gotta come back. And, you know, maybe that's where ghosts come from, is somebody who dies and they didn't get that, oh shit, no, I'm supposed to come back moment. And when they do, it's already, they're on the other side.
Well, even in fucking Casper, when we were kids, why are the ghosts there? Yeah, they have unfinished business. So, I think you also have to be at some level of ready to move forward.
Otherwise, you're going to be a Stephen King character forever.
So I just have a couple stories. I'm going to interject with one. That's okay. This one I wanted to share because this is so fucking me. Okay. You're going to love this. Alright, this person on Reddit, and I'm not even going to say it because the name is like 12 feet long, but I had pretty much the same experience as you did. Induced in coma for a week resulting from an MVA, so motor vehicle accident. I thought a machine at the end of my bed was a Slurpee machine. That'd be me. That'd be me right there.
Yes, that would be torture.
Right. Exactly. I was being held hostage in a Mike Smart, and no one would let me have a damn Slurpee.
Bam!
Or Coke in your case.
Coca-Cola.
Yes. I remember hearing lots of screaming and hearing someone yelling at the screams to shut the fuck up. Apparently some of that was me. I remember my ex visiting me, and I thought I said I loved you, but apparently I said I like your hair. I had tried to de-intubate myself and vaguely remember being stopped. I also said some weird shit to nurses about my health, like so weird they ran medical tests on me. Turns out I was fine, just a product of whatever awesome drugs they had me on. Anyways, I can't remember like 3 months before, and I barely remember the 3 months in the hospital. And then the next year is kind of blank too. In fact, most of my memory went to shit after that. Funny, I did the same thing. I tried to pull my stitches out of my forehead, but my hands were casted, so I couldn't really do any damage. High fives for staying alive.
I think that's hilarious, because they had to put my feeding tube in twice.
Did you get it out?
I just kept pulling it out. And I mean, I was on so much fentanyl, it should have, my best friend says, you were on more fentanyl than Michael Jackson when he died. So you're immediately more boss than Michael Jackson, of course. And I technically survived a disease that killed Muhammad Ali. So I'm just saying.
Good job.
Right? Like, I'm just saying. But I was on so many drugs and I just kept coming to. Mm-hmm. So there were moments, like, at one point I was in the room when they were doing something. Oh, they were doing a bone marrow scope on me. And I guess you have to gown up to do this. And I don't even know if I can't remember if I put this in the book, but it was basically that scene from E.T. when they have them in the clean rooms. Okay, because I woke up when they were in the middle of this, and I couldn't feel anything.
Oh, that's.
But I saw the white I saw the people in these white suits, and I'm looking around. I'm like, man, I wish Tyler was here. One of my best friends, he's terrified of ET. Like, it's his absolute worst nightmare ever. So my exact response was, I wish Tyler was here so he could see this.
Just like when the clown made the connection of being scared of clowns.
Right? It's like, oh yeah, no, this would be great to show him. But every time I'd come to, I tried to stand up and walk out, or I'd try to rip something out of my body.
Because you're done with this shit. You're like, I'm awake. Let's go.
Done. Let's go. I ripped what is that? And it was in an artery. So, you know, arteries, they bleed hard.
Oh, gosh.
So you painted the room.
I literally painted the ceiling and the walls covered in blood, and they weren't watching me at the moment because they thought I was in a coma. So I ripped this out of my arm and just shoot blood everywhere. And I'm just...
Neat.
Dripping blood. I tried to do it in the jugular as well, but they stopped me.
Oh my God, thank God.
Because by then they were on time. Yeah, I would have bled to death if I did that one. But I'm just like, get these tubes out of me now.
But also those poor nurses, because you are a horror movie. They're just in there, and all of a sudden there's blood just on the ceiling, and they're like, fuck.
Everywhere.
I'm leaving. I quit.
I actually, I don't know. I think she quit. She definitely left my case. I had a studying CNA try to sit me up after, and I was kind of in and out of it. So I sit up, and this poor girl is standing there in front of me, and I remember this very distinctly because everything in my body, which I don't even know how there was anything in my body, comes out on her.
Oh my God. You are literally a horror movie.
Face just this sinking, like it was Exorcist, and I don't know how to describe it. Like a person who's just seeing a horrific car crash happen in front of them, and they're being splattered with blood at that moment, and her face just dropped, and she's just like, oh my God. And you can see it in her eyes. Do I help the patient or do I help myself? Do I help the patient or do I help myself? She laid me back down very quickly and rushed out of the room, and I never saw her again. I'm like, I'm pretty sure she quit that day.
She's like, you know what? I'm just gonna go be a CNA at like a PCP office where people have colds and flus. I'm done.
I don't want any of this. It's so bad.
This next one that I have actually has stuck with me the most because of what they said when they came back. But when I was 15, I was scheduled to do a tilt table test where they lean you up at an angle. You're laying on a table and they move it, because I was consistently experiencing dizziness and fainting spells. After 20 minutes, the doctor tilted the table back and I could feel myself passing out. I got severe tunnel vision and lost 95% of my eyesight, like looking through a straw, and then I blacked out. I remember hearing the doctor call the code and my father yelling at them that they killed me. So before I continue, you go in for a tilt table test and you die.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Like the doctor's not ready for a code.
Test.
Yeah.
Right.
That's like if, like, I've done a stress test before.
I was going to say, we've had people stroke before in our
That's
office.
true. They come in for an eye exam and they stroke out. We have had that, yeah.
Oh my God, that's terrifying.
We are not equipped for that. We do not have a defibrillator. Our doctors are great eye doctors. They are not MDs. They were not trained to defibrillate.
Yeah,
so.
they got CPR, but that's about it.
Right. So you're doing a tilt table test and then your patient just fucking dies. Like...
Wow.
I remember hearing a lot of slamming and banging around, which I assumed was the crash cart and nurses shoving into this small testing room, and I felt a pressure on my chest, like when you have someone stand on your back to pop it, which I found out later was the nurses doing CPR. I saw an array of vivid colors dancing around and forming objects in the dark. The scariest thing was how peaceful it felt. Just pure 100% peace. There was no panic, no pain, no sadness, nothing but bliss. I coded for under 2 minutes, and as soon as I came to and opened my eyes, I felt this overwhelming sense of anger and hostility. I started ripping out everything that I could get my hands on and yelling at the doctor to get me off that table.
You guys, Jessie is just sitting here nodding her head on everything. She's like, I went through it. I'm fucking there.
I got you.
Yeah. And the reason that stayed with me is because, yeah, of course you want all this shit out of your body, but he was so angry because he was so happy.
Yes.
And they fucked it all up by saving his life.
It's so interesting that is the feeling. You get the weirdest emotions, especially like even just passing out. Like I don't know how you felt when you came to. It was just fear or just anxiety from it, but you just have the weirdest fucking emotions when you come back.
Just,
like what?
I just remember it being painful coming back. Like I was so chill and it was so calming. And like I said, I will choose drowning over anything. I swear to God.
Because you've done it. You can do it again.
And it was so peaceful. But
I suggest morphine.
Exactly.
This one is kind of gross.
Ooh,
but
funner that way.
I was electrocuted by 13,800 volts.
Wow.
Dude.
The doctors say it's likely the first hit stopped my heart and the second one started it. Before I was pulled like a lifeless corpse to safety. I remember experiencing the darkest dark and the most silent silence. I ceased to care that I was dying. Time seemed to change. It could have been hours, but it was only minutes. It was only about 30 seconds, not minutes. I felt as though I was floating and floated towards something that I eventually realized was my body in reality. Upon joining with whatever it was I was floating towards, I became self-aware in my body and heard the electricity making horrible noises, and I knew I was in danger. From there, it was a horribly painful experience, and I was upset that I had to come back. I lost most of my toes due to tissue death and had severe electrical burns on all 4 limbs. More surgeries than I have ever cared to count, and seeing the round bone ends of my toes that were freshly amputated still haunts me a little. I wish they would have let me kept floating.
Damn. Shit, that dude is mad.
Like, I would be mad.
Oh my God.
Like,
we are not promoting to kill yourself. Swear to God.
No.
But now I want to go get a DNR.
Oh my God.
Which is a do not resuscitate. Like, just let me die. No, I guess it depends on what age I'm at. But that's, you know, like my grandmother had a DNR. So deep into Alzheimer's that she couldn't remember how to swallow, because we've heard twice now from you and from actually someone we work with that it's the swallowing thing. Yeah. Like once you forget how to swallow.
Fast. That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's weird.
It's also interesting.
I don't know how to do this.
Yeah. Okay. It's also, you don't realize that it's learned like when you're a baby.
Yeah.
It's just something you feel like you should just be able to do. Yeah. Something that's really interesting that struck me when we started asking for these near-death experience stories, you would be amazed how many people you know in your life personally that have died.
Yeah, we've got 2 at work.
Yeah,
at least.
Just and we only have like 15 people in our office.
Yeah,
and we got 2 of them that have coded and come back.
And another one whose wife, like, it's that close.
Yeah. Yep. So just start asking people. Like I shared on Facebook, I was like, "Y'all ever died?" And I got messages like, "Yeah, some car accidents."
Which is interesting. We weren't expecting anything on that.
No, but. I mean, and I don't think necessarily your heart has to stop for you to be close to death and experience something like that. Like, you could just pass out and, like, be on the brink of it, you know, or it's just so interesting what people experience.
I think it's cool because when you do kind of open yourself up to it, you get to experience a lot of new information. So just sharing my story, I get to hear things like this. Yeah. And I've even had instances where a person will come up and they just say, "Something told me to talk to you. Let's talk." And I stop what I'm doing and I sit down and I talk with them.
What if you wake up one day and you're a medium?
That would be amazing.
You start a TV show.
Yes. It's cool though. I love it. I love being able to just like connect with people on that level.
Yeah.
And these are cool. I want to know more about that electrocution story. Like how? Why?
Dude, right?
I don't think you want it.
And I just want to throw this out there real quick.
Yeah.
If you think you're too young for like living will, DNR, if you want to, get your medical stuff in order as soon as you can. Because I was 21. I was at the peak of my health. I had no idea what was going to happen to me.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
But this one was like kind of ridiculous because it should have never happened. But my girlfriend is anaphylactic and is triggered by a chemical that is found in pretty much every food. When she was in high school, she had her first big reaction, and the school nurses refused to administer her EpiPen until the ambulance got there because they didn't want to be liable.
What the fuck?
Why even? So,
God.
I know schools ask parents with kids with food allergies to provide them with an EpiPen to keep at school. So maybe if the kid's having an allergic reaction, administer the EpiPen. Like you would think.
Life-saving drugs. Who would
Right.
who would want to do that?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, obviously, having an anaphylactic reaction doesn't give you a lot of waiting time. So by the time the ambulance got to her school, she was in pretty bad shape and she was barely conscious. The paramedics immediately administered one of her EpiPens, called the nurses some names, and loaded her into the ambulance. She continued to fade, so they gave her a direct injection of adrenaline this time, and still she was not reacting to the drug. They gave her a second direct injection of adrenaline, and this time it hits her about 30 seconds later all at once, and her heart fails. She stops breathing. There is no pulse. She's just dead to the world. For about 2 minutes and 46 seconds, she was clinically dead, and they almost stopped resuscitating her. The scariest thing is, she saw nothing. She tells me that when you are losing consciousness, you can't tell the difference between waves of drowsiness and when your body actually shuts down. All she saw was the darkness of her eyelids, and it felt like going into an extremely calm sleep where she couldn't hear or feel anything, and she didn't mind at all. All despite the fact that her mother and the paramedics were screaming at her to keep her eyes open, and the ambulance was flying towards the hospital. She miraculously just came back to life almost 3 minutes later, and they were giving her chest compressions, and the cardiologist that assessed her case later stated that all the adrenaline in her body was enough to not only stop her heart, but to also restart it with the little help from the paramedic pumping it around. But still to this day, she cannot differentiate falling asleep after a long day and dying.
Ooh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I gotta totally agree with that. I mean, if you don't know what's happening to you, that's kind of it. Like, cool, I'm going to sleep. It's over.
Exactly.
It's so peaceful. I think it's so upsetting for some people here how peaceful it is.
I think so too. Well, and our whole lives, like, you get so terrified of dying, and then to find out, or to at least assume from these stories that it's like falling asleep, it's like nothing. Like,
it's the you trying to live part that's painful.
I mean, we're not going to get into it, but that kind of makes you question why we're even, like, you were put here to suffer and then to die, which is better than being here, apparently.
Oh no, I don't think you're put here to suffer. I think we put ourselves through the suffering.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, some things hurt, I'll say that, but damn, is it a beautiful world we live in. And only when you die do you, I don't think it's only when you die.
Yeah.
You just gotta open your eyes to it.
Yeah.
Those rose-colored glasses are something to be said for. The stupidest shit makes me happy. Ladybugs, a good cup of coffee. I talk to my damn plants because I love them for being alive. And I try not to kill things, even spiders that freak me out. I try to give them a chance. Like, there was one crawling in my car the other day, and I made him leave. But I was like, I'm not gonna kill you. You gotta get out of here, man. You either take the car or you go. And it's just like, we put ourselves through all of this shit, and it's painful, yes, but it's so worth it because you get to see the sunrise every day and know that today could be the day we get to make incredible discoveries like the moon, or all of the planets in our solar system, which, fuck it, I went to school years ago. I don't know how many there are now. I still like to believe Pluto is a planet.
A second, Pluto is a planet.
That's right. We make all these beautiful discoveries and we make life better for other people. And if we think in that sense and we do that for the people around us, it's so much more worth living than if we just focus in on the pain of it.
And I hope that people do live like that. I just, now hearing, I think for so many people that death is so peaceful might shake their world a little bit,
That's true.
Especially people that are going with severe depression or anxiety or grief, or, I mean, the worst thing I've ever been through is grief. Grieving my father, watching my mother lose her soulmate. Like your mother said, I was telling Kristin the other day, and I have told her several times because we're very close, I had my brother and my mother and my boyfriend at the time, my husband that I had never even met, school, people all around me, so many things to live for. And the universe took one of those things from me, one out of a ton of them. but it was so important that I was like, I want to die too. I don't want to be here. I want to go with you. Like, I don't care, you know? And so I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to talk about your experience, because you're right. Like, there's a reason to, even if we don't know our purpose, there's a reason to be here. And maybe who's to say that you have to have some grand purpose? Maybe, like, I'm pretty happy in the mundane most of the time. Yeah. You know, I get to hang out with my dogs and my husband and go to movies with you and do this podcast, and that makes me happy enough.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, so I don't, sometimes I get into those, like, what's my purpose? Why am I here? What am I doing? Like, I don't feel fulfilled, but it's also talking about this kind of stuff that's like,
there is no purpose. Just
like,
do your thing.
Try to be happy as you can.
Yeah. Try to make the world a better place. I think if you, and I mean, this comes from a person who's been in the place of like, oh, it's just not worth it anymore. And the place of death is more peaceful. But if you, you just got to find something to live for.
Yeah. Well, like, you would have never met your son.
I know, right? Like, I can't imagine that. Like, holy shit, he wouldn't exist in this world. And I do believe he will change this world for the better. And I try to teach him that every single day, because I want him to be that person. But,
right.
I mean, and that's exactly it. It's like, I didn't know it when I came back, but it's like, yeah, I'm here for a reason. I'm just fucking just live until I find it.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
So this one's going to be a lot darker. This one is about,
bring it on,
not so much visiting heaven, but visiting hell.
Yes.
And this was the one that fascinated me the most years ago. There's actually, I think it's History Channel or something like that. They did the 7 Deadly Sins. And when they got to anger, they interviewed this guy. So I'm just going to start out with, he's an atheistic man with intense anger issues, including self-proclaiming to have upturned the dinner table more than once, and his wife and children feared him. All right. So in 1985, Howard Storm, he has a book if anybody wants to go read it, by the way. After returning to his Paris hotel room with his wife, had a sudden onset of severe abdominal pain. He was evaluated at Paris hospital and diagnosed with duodenal perforation, not going to get that right, and required surgery. As he lay waiting for surgery, he truly believed that he was going to die due to the severity of his pain, and so mentally prepared himself. After saying goodbye to his wife, he eventually passed out. Storm reports the following subconscious experience. He opened his eyes and found himself standing outside of his body, looking down at the hospital bed with his wife crying beside him. He was without pain and hypersensitive. His wife could not see or hear him. He was then drawn by voices calling his name outside the hospital room, and he followed them, believing they were taking him to a doctor. He describes pale, humanoid creatures that urged him down the hallway, saying that they had been waiting for him. The creatures became increasingly hostile, and upon refusing to continue following, they began to attack him. He then heard a voice saying, "Pray to God," and so he recited Bible fragment verses and the Pledge of Allegiance because it had God in it.
Right.
When he
especially for an atheist. Like,
exactly. Right? He didn't know. When he mentioned the word God, the creatures would retract, and eventually he was alone again. After a period of time, he called out for Jesus to save him, and suddenly was rescued by spiritual beings of light. Thereafter, he had a recollection of his entire life in review, which highlighted some negative aspects of his life, like him turning the dinner table and shit like that. Before the beings of light answered his questions, they told him that the United States was a blessed nation, but one which required change lest lose its prosperity. So if we don't change, we're fucked. He described visions of a future plagued by war, natural disasters, and despair, but which could be avoided should there be a major spiritual shift in the consciousness of the world. These beings told him that the correct religion is that religion that brings you closest to God, which I find fascinating. It's not saying go be a Catholic, go be anything. Just get your spiritual shit figured out.
It's like when people are like, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, and you're like, but seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people.
That's what I'm saying.
That's exactly how I feel.
You're right.
Exactly.
Then in that case, it's whatever gets you closest to whatever God you believe in, whether that be God, the Christian God, the Catholic God is the same, but
whatever helps you spiritually get there.
Judaism, like Islam.
Stop judging other people on their religion.
Yeah, exactly. Which is fascinating. This is not something I have written down, but in my textbook in psychology, there was a story about this guy who got into a car accident and he died, and his car actually went into water. And so he was drowning because he was trapped. And he said that he went down this hallway and it was hot and it smelled of sulfur, and there were these beings just crawling around that were terrifying. And they showed him all of these negative things, and they were like, you have to change or this will be it for you. And they sent him back, and he completely changed everything about his life.
That's what this dude did. He was an atheist. Now he's a minister and a pastor in his church and things like that. Yeah. He chose a church. I'm not even going to say which one it is because it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, no.
Whatever helped him get there spiritually.
And even if he didn't, if he just became more of a spiritual person, you know.
He was a person who people feared, and now people trust him and respect him.
Right. Yeah, I think that's it. It's like stop being so angry and selfish, and start just, you know, be happy with what you got, and be happy for the world around you. You know? Yeah. I think we could change the world if we were all just a little more.
Everyone has to die and come back. Then everything will be great.
Collectively, we'll all do that.
Please don't kill yourself. I don't know how many times I can say that.
No. That's not what I mean. We just put, like, it's like kind of like when you become of age and have to go into the military in some countries. We're going to put you in a coma. Yeah. For like 2 days.
Have you experienced this?
And then you're going to come back.
Exactly. It's totally safe.
Yeah. So this one's interesting. Actually, it caught my eye because they had actual horror movie nightmares.
Ooh, cool.
I remember it was a very long dream. First, it was a nightmare. I was being chased by these Chucky dolls with knives who were trying to murder me. Eventually, though, the dream shifted and Jesus came to me. He explained that he would take me to heaven if I was ready. My parents were there and they were very sad that I was going to leave. And I remember thinking about it a lot and weighing all the options, but I finally decided that I was going to go with Jesus. When I told Jesus I was ready, he smiled at me and said, "I'm sorry, it's not your time." He then went up into the sky and disappeared into the light. I was very upset because I was ready to go. Then I remember waking up and 3 months had passed. So it should be noted that this person, him and his family, were very Catholic, and that reaffirmed everything they believe, and he went on to be a doctor.
Interesting.
Yeah. Interesting.
So now he's just going to be Catholic for the rest of his life, I'm sure, because that was his experience.
Right.
Oh, I was going to say, I feel like even in that kind of sense, we all experience something dark and something light. And a lot of religions, not all, but a lot of religions have that kind of same distinction.
The God and the devil, basically. Yeah.
Which isn't that fucking fascinating? That all these different cultures that didn't talk to each other came up with the same thing.
Yeah, that's very true.
What's fucking real? Just
right? We'll find out when we really get there.
Exactly.
Okay, you're gonna hate this.
Me?
It goes on with the horror movie dreams.
I love the horror movie dreams. I think that's awesome.
So for background, so you know us a little bit better.
Is it something to do with The Grudge?
The scariest movie I've ever seen.
Is that terrifying to you too?
I love The Grudge. Yeah.
The scariest movie to me is The Exorcist and The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Exorcism movies. The scariest movie to her is The Grudge.
Oh my God, when she's like just crawling down the stairs. Did you see the original, the Japanese version of it?
We reviewed it with The Grudge.
Okay, I'm just going to suggest you a movie called The Sisters. It is, I don't know what nationality it is. I feel like it's a Korean horror movie, but they follow the same kind of idea of like the ghost is always the main horror movie monster. Shit.
Oh God. Okay, I'm writing it down right now. Because I love to be scared, but also that's horrible. But that's great. The Sisters?
The Sisters. Okay. It's really hard to find in this country, but you'll find it.
Okay.
Before I entered into a coma, because she entered a coma, she fell from the second story of a gym under construction and landed on her head.
Jesus Christ.
Why were you?
Right before that, she had watched The Grudge. So during the entirety of the coma, this literally, I could not picture a worse hell for you. I dreamed that I was trapped in a completely white room from floor to ceiling with the Grudge girl. She never moved and just stood there in the corner. But when I woke up from that coma, I refused to close my eyes for several nights from fear of seeing her again. I'm gonna let you process that.
So you and I have talked about it because we've seen it and reading the book and all of that.
Yeah.
And one of the kids, I'm just like, oh, whatever, this is kind of boring. But when you actually put yourself in the kids seeing their nightmares, I would have a heart attack. If I saw that grudge girl coming at me, crawling at me, I would have a fucking heart attack.
I had a dream, and Reagan McNeil was in my dream the other night, just like 3-4 nights ago. And I woke up, and Brad and I had set a sleep timer on our TV. And I woke up, and the room was dark, and I was like, "Where's the remote?" And I was like, "Brad, wake up! Where's the remote? I gotta turn the TV on." Like, I have to watch like Bob's Burgers or Archer or Family Guy or like something mindless and animated, and like I could not go back to sleep. So I can't imagine like if I ever was in a coma and it was all The Exorcist, I would be like, "Can you please just take me? I don't care if it's heaven.
I'd be like, please
right get me out of here." That's if I was the devil, that's what I would do. Like, if you really want to make a deal, like trick somebody, be like, "I'll get you out of here if you come with me." I'd be like, "Okay,
right, I'm
get me out of here."
I don't want to do this anymore.
Okay. I was in a chemically induced coma for 2 weeks. My situation was not normal. They didn't know what was wrong with me, other than that my lungs were totally full of fluid and my brain was on the fast track to shutting down. They told my mother I was going to die and they couldn't do anything about it. They said over and over that I shouldn't be alive, and they kept telling me that. The nurses, the doctors, the girls in the ambulance. I remember fading away while staring at the freakishly bright lights in my face in the ER. If others' dreams were anything like mine, they won't want to tell you about them, or it'll be scary. They're not dreams. They're another reality. I remember meeting people that I'd never seen or heard of, becoming really good friends with them, then watching one of the girls die in a horrific car wreck. Apparently, I came to at some point and started asking the girl, "Is she okay?" And it was the most vivid thing I've ever been a part of. I remember there was a party where people were covered in animal shit. There was some really dark stuff that I really don't want to talk about, much less write down. I have, quote unquote, forgotten some of it, I suppose. It was terrible for me. Some people's experiences may be different, but mine was a drug-induced hell, and I wouldn't wish those dreams on anyone. I spent 14 days under. I was not aware of anything on the outside. It never occurred to me that I may have been dead or dying. I never once thought I was in bad shape. I walked into the hospital with less than 30% blood oxygen concentration. All of this happened on Christmas Eve night. I'm 6 years past that now, and I was told the only lasting damage was some scar tissue on my lungs that may or may not go away. If you're dying, your dreams are fucked up, and nothing good or fun took place.
I call bullshit that she didn't quote unquote remember things. Like, she didn't remember, or she remembers all of that shit for sure.
She probably, like she said, she doesn't want to talk about it. She doesn't want to write it down. Like, it's just too real. All right, I only have like 2 stories than his. So this last one that I have is actually from a coworker of Kristin and myself. And it's so funny because I shared this on my Facebook of like, "Hey, I'll live or die. Like, let me know." And he came the next day and was like, "I was in a coma and I died." I was like, "Tell me about it." So he came into my office, or our office, sat down, and I typed it out while he talked. So he got really sick, and his wife noticed that he wasn't breathing at night, and he was turning blue.
I do want to start with, he is also a religious man.
He is.
He is Catholic, intensely Catholic, on both sides of his family. So that brings a lot into this.
Yeah. When they went to the emergency room, he had to be immediately intubated and had a 108-degree fever because he was allergic to a drug that he had been taking that made him really sick. So they did the whole thing, the ice packs and all that. He also mentioned, and I never want to hear this from another human being ever again, that he shed. He shed his skin and his fingernails.
That was fucking terrifying.
What?
Yeah. Right?
He
all
got
of his hair,
so
all
hot.
of his fingernails, everything.
Everything was just like, we're gone. It's
too
hot.
He was a brand new person.
He just got new skin and everything.
Yeah. Oh my god.
He could hear things going on around him, but he was in hell. So he described this as he was on a spiral staircase and heard nothing but Jack in the Box music. Like when that like carnival-y, circus-y kind of music. So he was on a cross, like he was being crucified, and his grandmother was below him, riding around on a tricycle or a bicycle. I don't remember which one he said. But the thing was, she was holding on to and was connected to him by his intestines that were hanging out of his body.
That's some fucked up shit.
Exactly. And his family, who were much older than him, and he was like in his 20s at the time, were children versions of themselves, and they were down below him, taunting him and screaming at him. And he mentioned that Charmed was what they decided to put on TV in his room. And so, of course, Charmed is witchcraft. And
well, I found it all fascinating also because he mentioned that his fever was 108. And he's just imagining himself in hell. That
he said it was
your
like,
brain's trying to go, why are you so hot right now?
It was a room with literally fire and brimstone and like all of that stuff. As he got better and his fever came down, the dreams got better. He also basically said he restarted his childhood. So after that, his fever started coming down, he was a child. And then as his fever got better and he was closer to coming out, he aged up to where he was actually in real life.
Interesting.
Which is super interesting. So he basically grew again. He had to relearn how to swallow and use all his extremities, and he had 2 heart attacks while he was under and had to be resuscitated.
Jesus Christ, dude.
Which has left him with lifelong problems, because he does have a lot of health problems.
He has like a pancreas problem because of that fever getting so intense and just fucked up his body.
Yeah, just for everybody to know, you get 102 as an adult, go to the hospital because you start to suffer brain damage.
Exactly.
So it's bad. We can't survive a few days with a high fever.
Yeah.
Literally.
Start frying brain cells.
Yes. That's why I like to tell people I'm blonde and brain damaged, and just to let you know I'm now brunette, so.
Actually, to go along with that story, I only had the 2, but I just remembered something that I wanted to bring up actually. So I have another story, and this is really interesting to me. So it says, my dad was in a coma for about 2 months a couple of years ago. Recently we were talking about the whole thing, and he told me that he had dreamed/hallucinated that he lived for 10 years and did all sorts of things during that time. He said it was very vivid, and he walked across the country a couple of times during it. When he woke up and got home, he said it would throw him off when he would run into people and that he hadn't seen before the coma, because at first he always expected them to have aged by 10 years.
Interesting.
So he lived a whole other life for 10 years while he was in that coma.
For 2 months, right?
Exactly.
That's incredible.
So on that note, there are people that are in comas for years and years and years and years. Don't fucking let that happen to me. This is out on a public forum.
Yeah.
It is recorded. It can never be deleted off the internet. If I'm in a coma for years, don't let that shit happen to me. I don't want to be in a coma for years. 40 days or 30 days. Yeah. 16 days.
16
sounds horrible enough. God. Don't let me go through whatever personal hell I'm in for years. Please, God, I don't know what the proper time is. But I'm just throwing that out there.
Here's the great thing.
Yeah.
I just got to throw this out here. So my siblings taking the opportunity. My family's very funny. We can make a joke at a funeral just because it just seems like the right moment. Right? So my sister and my brothers decided to convince me I was not in a coma for 16 days. I was in a coma for 3 years.
Oh, God.
And that they had moved on with their lives in so many ways, but they were there for me. But they made up these elaborate stories that the 3 of them went together with.
Oh my God.
On this, like, my sister got married and had babies, and my brothers were both, well, one of them was already like in the process of getting married, but they were married and everybody was living their lives. So I legit thought for maybe like 2 days that I had been in a coma for several years. And it was pretty freaky. I was like, oh my God, I missed out.
Funny, but so also incredibly fucked up.
It was hilarious. Now it's hilarious because I'm like, okay, I've only gone for 16 days. Yeah. But I will say it's weird to know that I wasn't alive for 16 days. Like I wasn't here for 16 days because like I try to make up stories in my mind as though I was. Like, oh yeah, the one time when somebody did something because they told me the story. Or there's this whole movement happening in Washington at the time, and I turned on the news and I was like, what the fuck happened while I was it's like I literally didn't exist for this time frame. That's so weird. 3 years? That would have been a lot to consider.
Yeah. There's so much you have to relearn.
Oh yeah. I thought I was gonna have to learn names of nieces and nephews. I'm like, what the fuck am I gonna do?
Yeah, love people you've never met before.
Right.
I've said it numerous times in the past, and I very much believe that everything is cyclical. Our souls just go into the next body, and we just continue. Like, I'm sure there's a break for a little bit until our body is ready, and then we just move on. And that whole 10-year thing definitely makes me think of that. It makes me think, like, his soul moved on for a little bit.
Maybe.
Like, he chilled for 10 years somewhere else. doing something else with another family.
Yeah.
And honestly, that gives me a lot of hope. Like, I don't believe it ends. I believe, it's gonna sound really weird, but like, let's go all the way back, like dinosaurs and shit like that. That stuff just keeps repeating over and over again
in different manifestations.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's interesting. Well, it's like it's reincarnation.
Yeah.
I believe in reincarnation. Yeah.
Exactly.
You should meet my cat dog. I lost a cat, and 5 days later, I had a dog born that looks exactly like her. So much so that the vet was like, I'm pretty sure this is your reincarnated cat.
So that's funny you say that, because you've met Leia.
Yes.
And you met Pudge.
Yes.
Because Brad took Pudge to work with him.
I remember Pudge.
Yes.
So well.
So Brad and I adopted a 12 or 13-year-old pug in July of 2017. And last August we lost him. So we only had him for about a year. Mm-hmm. And he was probably about 14 at the time we lost him. He was incontinent the whole time we had him, and his tongue hung out of the left side of his body, and there were just so many things that were so characteristic of him. Mm-hmm. We lost Pudge on August 31st, and Leia, our pit bull puppy, was born on the next day. Mm-hmm. The next day. Mm-hmm. She's incontinent for the rest of her life. 10-month-old puppy. Maybe they spayed her too early, which they did, which is fucked up, and that's another story, but why is that 10-month-old pit bull incontinent for the rest of her life? Mm-hmm. Like,
I will always believe that's Pudge.
There are so many things that Brad and I have noticed about her behaviors, about when she came home, the things that she did and where she went, and just it was the craziest thing. You remember, she had a limp when she was a baby up until she was like 6 months old, and the vet had no idea why. We had no idea why, and because Pudge had a lot of mobility issues, and he was gimpy, and she was gimpy, and she's a baby. There's no reason she should limp, and she limped. Like, and the first when I had that epiphany, I honestly teared up. I was like, we lost him the 31st. She was born the 1st. Like, we just happened to walk into the rescue. We got married and walked into this rescue that we had, like, there are so many rescues in Colorado Springs. And we were just in that area. We were like, let's go by and look. And we left with her that day. Like,
I will always believe that's Pudge.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. He just got a new body. That's exactly
a very able body who now runs around and plays in the water. And he loved getting baths, and she loves playing in the hose. And, you know, it's just so interesting. Death and everything that comes with it is just so interesting that we'll never understand, and it can be scary, but hopefully through talking about this, like, it makes it less scary. Like, yes, we are a horror podcast, so we love scary, but death is one of those things where you should never try to make it as scary as possible, because it's inevitable and we all have to experience it, and it should be as peaceful and, I hate to say, easy as possible, you know? So, again, thank you, Jessie, so much for being here. We hope you had a good time. I know it's hot as balls in this house because we don't have AC, but thank you so much for being here. And again, you can find Jessie's book, I believe, on Amazon. Is that pretty much? Okay. Yep. It is called Heaven, Hell, and a Mango, and we didn't really touch on this, but when you woke up, you had mango ice cream.
Oh my God, I was obsessed with mangoes the minute I woke up. For some reason, I've never touched mangoes before in my life. Like, as a kid, it didn't cross my mind. And when I came out of my coma, before I came out of my coma, I tasted mangoes. I smelled mangoes. They were the thing I could smell in heaven. And so I woke up just craving. I want a Coca-Cola and a mango. And if you don't get me one of those things, I'm going to lose it. So I obsess over them as being the thing that brings me a little closer to my piece of heaven, kind of like meditation for some. It's not so close that I feel like I'm there again.
Right.
But it's close enough where it satisfies that peace of mind.
Yeah.
And so my book is Heaven, Hell, because I went to heaven after experiencing what was absolutely hell. And then I craved mangoes like crazy, and I still crave them to this day.
Which is why the mango. We had actually mango mimosas today.
Yes,
and
I got some dry mango here that I can't wait to dig into.
Yes. So check it out on Amazon. I think it's like it's not expensive at all.
Like $2 or something?
It's like $2.
Yeah, exactly. So check it out. It's not a long read. It's not like they're very concise and to the point. Like, it's great because you just get right into the drama of your situation. Not drama in like a dramatic way, but the true drama that you had to tell and your mother had to tell. So check it out on Amazon. And thank you so much for listening again to this loosely formatted episode.
Yes.
You can hang out with us on Facebook and Instagram at The Exorcisters Podcast. You can find find us on Twitter at theexorcisters. You can find us on our website, which is exorcisters.com. We have blogs and all of our episodes, things like that on there that you can check out. And you can always email us at theexorcisters@gmail.com.
And until next time, stay creepy.